I'm Dave Haynes. I'm the opinions editor at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And we're joined today by the editorial board reporters and editors from the newspaper and the Assembly Speaker in Wisconsin, Jeff Fitzgerald, who is running for the U.S. Senate seat. Assembly Speaker, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So I'll ask you the question you've been getting a lot lately. You're running a campaign, I'm not sure we'd say on a shoestring, but you certainly don't have as much money as some of your counterparts. I've heard you say that name recognition is a bit of a problem for you, which might be understanding. You haven't had a lot of advertising. So is this a real campaign? And if it is, what's your path to victory?
Yeah, it's a real campaign, and I think that, from the get-go, we always knew that this was going to be more of a grassroots and that I was always going to be the underdog in this campaign. When you looked even, before Eric Abdi got into the race, whenever you have a name like Thompson and Mark Newman, who have run statewide several times, I knew that it would be an uphill battle. We knew money would be difficult. It was kind of the catch-22. We had the recalls going on, so really there wasn't a lot of focus put on this race at all. It was all focused on the recalls, which actually I think helped me for a long time because there wasn't any advertising from the candidates and it really helped. But it also soaked up a lot of those dollars. And I won't lie to you, when Governor Thompson got into the race too, a lot of the big supporters in Wisconsin that support Republicans, the money really dried up. So we knew we were going to have to do it kind of the old-fashioned way and run on a different message and I think a more clear message and really go out and just talk to people and that's what I've been doing. It hasn't been a very sexy U.S. Senate race. It's been a lot of time behind the wheel of my car and driving and put almost 40,000 miles on my O2 Taurus and going out and talking to groups and talking to people and doing parades and whatever we can get our message to. So
what's your path to victory? We had Mark Newman in the other day, and essentially he was saying, I'm going to let Eric Abdi and Governor Thompson beat up on each other and I can sneak in. He has the Tea Party support now as well. That would seem to be a strategy that might work for you, but he might be in a better position with better financing to do that.
Yeah, that would be great if there weren't negative ads associated with Mark Newman too. Obviously, there's a connection with Club for Growth with Mark that I think people put two and two together. So I have really benefited, and to tell you the truth, the most momentum I've seen in my campaign has come in the last month. And you guys know, I've talked to some of you, that this was always kind of my strategy. I was just going to keep my head down, try and run a positive campaign of what I was able to accomplish here in the last year and a half as Speaker of the Assembly. That although we made some tough choices and some tough decisions, we got the state back on the right track. Balance a $3.6 billion deficit, did it without raising taxes. We're $150 million to the plus side now. We always knew that was going to have to be our message and stay clear. And I can tell you, in the last 3 weeks, and I believe it's because of the political fatigue that we are seeing here in the state of Wisconsin, that people are pretty fed up with politics right now with all the recalls going on, that the three of them going negative on each other has really opened up the door. And if you look at the latest polling, I know I was way down there at 6%, but jumping up to 13%, more than doubling. You always want to be an upward trend line heading into the final week of an election, and that poll is already 6 days old already. So hopefully that trend line is continuing. But I had to always benefit from those guys going negative on each other, and they are doing that. And when I talk to people,
were you expecting that, or did that surprise you?
no, it didn't surprise me at all. I mean,
No?
I have always expected that would happen. Yeah,
As bad as it did?
Probably not to the level that it's gotten. I had not thought that it would get as nasty as it did that quick. But I always knew there were issues with each of the candidates that I thought would probably be exposed, and I thought if they were going after each other, I thought I'd have a good chance at kind of staying out of the fray, which I have been, and I thought that would benefit me, and obviously it has over the past probably 2 or 3 weeks.
James? And please introduce yourself.
I will. James Causey, editorial writer, columnist, and blogger. Just staying on the being positive. Does using negative techniques, does that help at all in a race? Does it benefit anyone? I mean, does it work? They do it, so it must have some kind of impact.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you negative advertising doesn't work. Yeah, it absolutely works. But I think it's also at a different level when you do it in a primary. I think that people that are, supporting conservative candidates in this Republican primary, to do it against one of your own and know that that person's going to have to go on to the general election, it seems to take a more different tone, I think, and that's what I've seen play out. But, the real answer is, does it work? Yeah. I think Eric Hovde, a month out, had a real surge going, and obviously was seeing some positive numbers, and I think the other two camps felt that if they didn't go negative on him or start introducing him more to the public, that he could have probably just kind of ran away with this, and that's why you see that in politics.
You're going to stay positive, though.
I'm going to stay positive to the end here. We're 4 days out, but I'm going to run on the message of what we were able to do in Wisconsin, we need to do in Washington right now.
Changing gears for a second, the shooting Sunday in Oak Creek. There's been a lot of talk about changing the national gun laws. Do you think there needs to be any changes?
Yeah, my thoughts and prayers go out to the Sikh community, and then obviously a terrible tragedy that happened and to Oak Creek community. But I think oftentimes we rush to look at the gun control debate and get very political when we see a tragedy like this. But I truly believe that in both instances we've seen in Colorado and now that we've seen right here in Oak Creek, that we shouldn't rush to judgment. And obviously I've always been a Second Amendment, in favor of the Second Amendment, and I believe that there shouldn't be an infringement on it. And I don't know if there's anything you could legislate through, whether Congress or state legislatures, that really is going to get to the crux of how you would deal with, really insane people that you're dealing with right now. So, that's kind of where I stand on the issue, and I think it's a very difficult issue. And, can there be a discussion on it? Absolutely. And I think we should probably wait to have a calm discussion on whether or not, there is room there.
May I interject? When should we? We've had 4 mass shootings here in the last decade, 5, 6, 7. How many will it take before somebody moves off the dime on this?
You know what, Bill?
In this state,
well,
not nationwide.
I don't know what you could pass. I don't know. I mean, this individual went through the proper check, went through a background check. I mean, what could we have put in place for him to stop this attack? I mean, that's what I don't know what the answer is. What could we have put in place? Is it gun control? I don't believe it is. I think you have law-abiding citizens that follow the law, but there are going to be some people that obviously that are insane people and that are going to break the law, and I don't know how you legislate against that.
Related, not to the shooting in Oak Creek, but to gun law, the state attorney general has said that he would be open now to additional training for people applying for concealed carry permits. Would you favor that?
I wouldn't. I think we put in the legislation what we thought the proper training would be for the law. So, obviously myself and the Attorney General don't agree with that. So, no, I think in the bill we specifically put, what we should have for training requirements for concealed carry.
I took a concealed training class, and I was in a class with about 50 people. I never was able to handle a gun. No one said you need to handle a gun or show me that you know how to use a gun or anything like that. Don't you think that's like a flaw in the system? You never have to indicate or show that you even know how to handle a gun properly?
I don't. I believe in Second Amendment right. I think that we put in there that you had to apply for the permit, put some background checks in there or whatever you had to do to get that permit to make sure, and I think that's what has to happen from that aspect.
Okay.
Hi, Lee Berquist, reporter at the paper. Do you think that before Tuesday that Governor Walker will firmly make an endorsement in this race, or will he?
Will or wish, Lee? I do not, Lee. I don't believe he'll make an endorsement. I think he'll stay out of it, and he has indicated that to us that I believe he'll stay out of this
You've
race.
approached him.
Yes, I have approached him several times.
Since that story came out on Saturday by Craig Gilbert that
I did
where he
not.
kind of talked about it.
I have not talked to the governor directly,
Since
but I have talked to his chief of staff and
since then.
since then.
And
Yes.
got the sense that they were not going to endorse.
Exactly,
Okay.
yep.
And do you get the sense that that this whispering campaign I'm hearing that he really is supporting Governor Thompson in this race, but won't publicly do so because he doesn't want to offend the speaker who helped him get through his legislative agenda in the last year.
No, I think that's Governor Thompson's team doing a good job of putting that out there, of trying to make it look like Governor Walker is supporting him. But no, we've had conversations in the past, and I believe the governor will stay out of this. Now, will I leave here and probably do another call? Yeah, absolutely, to try and get him, to persuade him in the last few days here. But no, I don't think so, Lee.
Okay.
What do you think should happen on the federal level with taxes? The Bush tax cuts are due to expire at the end of the year. A number of other things are happening too at the end of the year we want to ask you about, but specifically in tax policy, where do you think we ought to go?
Well, I think we need to reform our tax code, and I've said this from the beginning that you have a complex tax code. You have a lot of exemptions that have been put in there over the years, and I favor more of a flat tax approach, both from the corporate aspect of things at
A
25%.
specific percentage?
25%
For corporate?
corporate flat
Okay.
tax rate.
Okay.
I
about
think to make
individuals?
us more competitive, we're currently at 35%. We're the highest in the industrialized world right now. I prefer that. I think from a standpoint of individuals, 0 to 50,000 would be at a 10% flat. If you're a married couple, 0 to 100,000 would be 10. Above that, you would look at a 25% flat tax as well.
So you'd favor two brackets, flat tax, and which exemptions would be sacrosanct to you?
Well,
Are there any of them that you wouldn't touch?
I think, if you look at, mortgage interest, some of the ones that, I think are probably more popular and sustainable now, I think you'd have to look at and see, and possibly, the legislation, whether you had a choice to opt for the flat tax or if you wanted to stick with deductions, to maybe have that option. So that's something to look at as well.
So just so I understand, under the flat tax, are you saying that there might still be a mortgage exemption under your plan?
There
or-
could be, yes.
Okay.
Yes, there could be, yep.
Okay. What about charitable deductions?
I think you'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis to see, yeah.
Okay.
You've talked a lot about your leadership and in the assembly and how you've used that as how you would, is why you have leadership and why that would serve you well in Washington. But certainly it was a fractious time in the last 18 months, but that all came at a time when there was control of the legislature by both. Republicans controlled everything. If you go to Washington, it's an entirely different picture. You'd have the Senate controlled potentially by Democrats, and obviously the House is a Republican, and you have a Democratic governor. Or a Democratic president. It's entirely different circumstances, isn't it, than what happened, what you did in Madison. And I'm just wondering how you can transfer what you do in Madison to something in Washington.
Yeah, I think when I talk about my leadership style and what I think that is my best asset, is that I'm able to be able to on a particular issue be able to build consensus and build support on that issue. You're right though, Lee. I've served in split legislatures. I've served under Governor Doyle for 8 years. It's definitely different than when you serve with one-party control. But even in my own caucus, I think that you have to be able to work with people. And when you look at the different assembly districts and the different members I had throughout the state, not everybody has a district like mine is that is more heavily GOP district. So I've always worked with members, and obviously in the legislature, probably 95% of the bills pass with bipartisan support, and I've worked with Democrats on both sides of the aisle. I've worked with, Jason Fields on some school choice bills. So I'm not opposed to working across the aisle to get something done that I think would benefit the state. But, it gets back to my core principles, and I think the real thing that we faced are just really come down to what your ideology is, and I wouldn't compromise on those principles that I felt were going to go in a different direction. So, it definitely would be different. You definitely have to see what you can build consensus around, and that's kind of where you have to take it from there.
Give us a
Certainly
couple of
the-
examples of legislation in the last session where you worked with Democrats to
I think
pass major legislation.
That's a good question. I don't know if there's been a lot that the Democrats got on board with. It was pretty divided this session, but I think just from some of the probably the thing that I think people missed out on was we passed 10 pieces of legislation in the first month in January. A lot of them that were pro-business bills. We did see a lot of Democrats that crossed over, whether it was tax credit bill or some of the stuff that we did early on. I think even Mark Pocan in his congressional race is getting beat up for voting with us on some of those. But that's really what I think should be bipartisan. I think when it comes to jobs in the economy, that shouldn't be a partisan issue. And I think we saw a lot of them vote. So I would take that full litany of bills that were passed in that first month that we saw a lot
You
of
said
that.
there's a lot of division. Do you bear any responsibility for that division? Certainly you're portrayed as such by the Democrats as a divisive kind of guy who, my way or the highway kind of guy.
I don't believe I'm a my way or the highway guy. I think that gets back to ideology. I think Democrats controlled everything last session, when I was the minority leader. And, they decided that, the way that they were going to solve the budget deficit was by raising taxes and doing some cutting. And we just saw that it simply didn't work. They raised taxes by $5 billion and got us the largest deficit we've ever seen at $3.6 billion. So, when it came to those matters, no, we were going to stick with what we believed could get the state back on the right track. So, is it the job of the minority to try and put up roadblocks and try and take the other side of things? Absolutely, but I did think there were bills that pure politics got in the way. I think a perfect example of that was the mining legislation, where that should not have been a bill that Democrats were voting against. When you looked at it, the jobs that it could have created, 1,000 jobs in a depressed area of the state in northern Wisconsin, Iron County, could have supported jobs down here in Caterpillar to help keep people employed. I think pure politics sometimes gets in the way of things, and I think that was a prime example with that bill, because I just think that they didn't want to give the Republicans and Governor Walker a win right before the recall election. So there's a lot of stuff that has been very divisive over the past 2 years that I think you probably will see change, I think, in this next session, and it won't be as divisive as we have seen.
Do you think you'll take back the Senate? Republicans will take back the Senate?
You know what? I think they've got a great shot at taking back the Senate. I think, when you look at the Holpern seat, Tom Tiffany, one of my members, is running there. He's a very hardworking guy, has run for that Senate seat a couple times, so he's got good name ID. I think that's a seat that they could possibly take back. I think you look at the 18th, the Jess King seat. I think when you look at numbers, raw numbers there, and how the governor did in the recall, that's a potential seat. The Green Bay seat and the Cross seat. Yeah, so there's more opportunities, I think, to take it, and I think come November, there's a good chance to flipping it back.
If you are the eventual Republican candidate, I have a feeling that Act 10, even though it's not a national issue, is likely to come up. So in a Republican primary, I suspect that what the Republicans did with Act 10 is fairly popular. But how does that translate to a general election where you have to appeal to Democrats and independents?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And will, if I come out to be the nominee, I shouldn't say if, I should say when I do, right? Sorry, I got to catch myself. I saw my staff looking at me.
On Wednesday morning.
On Wednesday morning. I think if the recall election would have went different, and obviously I would, was front and center for that, and people had asked me before that, if, Governor Walker doesn't do well, what does it say for your U.S. Senate campaign? I said, well, I think it says it all too well. If the governor would have failed in that attempt, I think it would have been very tough for me to run the campaign I'm running on. We reformed it in Act 10, and we made tough choices, but in the end, it, put the state on the right track. So, I think that'll definitely play. I think it'll probably turn into another statewide race where, you have Tammy Baldwin, who, was in there with the protesters, and obviously very strong feelings from the other side. It could be a rehash of that. And, Governor Walker, being that the numbers that he got statewide, I think was most encouraging to me, because that wasn't just getting your Republican base. That means that you had to win some independents over as well. And I think the numbers that he showed. So I would like my chances in that race because of that, and I think because of the way that the recall turned out.
All of the, switching gears again, all the Republican candidates have talked about repealing Obamacare, repealing the Health Care Reform Act. How is your stance different from the other three, and what would you do to replace it?
I don't think any of us are different on that stance. I think we all want to repeal it. I just think you have to get to a market-driven approach. And as Speaker of the Assembly, we were finally able to get through the health savings accounts. But I don't trust the government or insurance companies to make healthcare decisions for myself or my family. I think it should be put in the hands of the people to make those choices, and getting away from the lose it or use it mentality. So if you have a family plan and, your business, your company is going to put $1,500, instead of just paying that $1,500 for the month, and you either use that healthcare or you don't for that month, put that into an account that it is an account that it can accrue and can build. You're in charge of those dollars. I think the real problem with healthcare is the transparency. There's no transparency in healthcare anymore. We don't know what specific things cost. I think that's a real problem. So, everything else we do has to deal with consumerism and competition, in the marketplace here in the United States, except healthcare. And I think that's a real problem. Here in Wisconsin, we never really had a problem with access. We've had a problem with the cost of healthcare. The example I use is LASIK eye surgery. 15 years ago, I'm not sure what it cost, but $3,500 per eye or whatever when it first came out. Very expensive. Now you can go online on your computer there, Lee, and probably pull up 40 doctors in the area that perform that procedure, get testimonials, and it's driven the price of that down to now you can get it $1,500 for both eyes. So putting competition back in the marketplace for healthcare. I think if you look at Obamacare, you're just kind of looking at another entitlement that I think will come, and I believe that will bankrupt our system. When you look at the entitlements, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, interest on our debt, by the middle of next decade, you're looking at all the federal dollars really going to those programs. Now you look at Obamacare. I'm just afraid we're getting to the place where a lot of Europe is right now, where you've had a lot of promises made by politicians, and they can't deliver on those promises anymore. So they're not only not reforming the stuff they have, now they're pulling the rug out from people that have paid into a system that now no longer are going to receive those services. I thought it was a staggering account that AP just did the other day that now shows that Social Security, if you're retiring now, you have paid more in than the benefits you're going to receive. And when it was first started, there were 5 people working for every person on Social Security, where now that's getting down to almost 2 people working for every one.
How do you interject market-driven forces into the healthcare market? How do you do that? What role is there for government in making that happen?
Yeah, I think if you look at it from, I've endorsed Paul Ryan's plan. I think when he looks at the voucher system that he uses, I think
Medicare.
it's for Medicare is a way to drive into the private sector, to do that. He talks about state exchanges that you can go through and purchase health care. I think that's a way to do it. And then I also think that through private employers that like I said with the health savings accounts, that if you put people in charge of their own dollars, it's going to help drive that cost down. I just believe that, because I think if you're able to take those dollars, take it with you if you change jobs or whatever, you're in control of those dollars, not somebody else. So you get away from that use it or lose it mentality.
But even some of those who are critical of the Affordable Care Act like certain aspects of it, such as the keeping kids until 26 or the pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, and I think under, Paul
Would you
Ryan,
keep those?
well, Paul Ryan's plan would allow, if you're purchasing that insurance, that, through those state pools, that, those are things that would be still offered in there, so.
And would you favor that?
You know what, that's a very popular thing, especially the pre-existing conditions, so, if you can purchase that, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Would you want your mother on a Medicare voucher system? Not that she would be eligible under this one, but really, would you want your mom to have that?
I would want my mother in control of her own health care. I think this is, right now, we're just on a system that's not going to work. It's not like we can't see that, socialized medicine is working in other countries. We know it's not working. So I'm more that you have to have a plan, because we know we're on an unsustainable course when it comes to entitlements in this country. So, yeah, I think we have to make those adjustments now, because I don't want when, myself or my kids that, there's not going to be anything there. And that's when I say tough choices, I think the biggest problem people are fed up with politicians right now is people are afraid to take on the third rail of politics. And I think that's what we proved in Wisconsin here, that you can take on the third rail. And believe me, when I walked in my caucus and told people what we were going to do with collective bargaining, there are a lot of people that looked at me and said, "Are you sure about this, Fitz?" But we're at a point where we've got to make some of these tough decisions, When Paul Ryan put his plan out, if you guys remember his roadmap, there were not only Democrats not standing behind him, there were no Republicans standing behind him either. But you know what? Paul kept on it and kind of, tweaked the plan and kept doing it. And, and now he's got literally the entire House. Republicans are running on this go around. But, is there a political downside? Absolutely, because there are going to be people that demagogue on it. The pushing the senior citizen off the cliff commercial is the one that comes to mind.
But I guess more importantly, he would have to, you're in your 40s. So it's the guy or woman in their 40s who's potentially gonna be hit by this. So
Yes.
how do you convince that person
Yeah.
to go with this, and it may not work?
You know what you do? You tell them the truth. Because we know the plan we have right now is not going to work. And I think people from my generation don't believe that there is going to be a Social Security system when we get there. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to be truthful with people and say, listen, currently you're going to be, anybody 55 or older, you're going to be able to retire at 65 and receive those benefits. But you know what? Is this a political downside? Yeah. If I tell now people in my generation, you know what, maybe you're going to have to wait till you're 67 to retire now, but we need to make this program solvent again. And if we don't take these changes and do them right now, there's not going to be anything left for you there. And I think that's why I say you have to take that political risk on. You're right. There could be a backlash, from voters that say, no way, keep your hands off of what you're doing. But I think we're getting to a point where people understand that the current system is not going to work in the condition it is in. And if we don't, and whether you like it or not, looking at Europe right now is really a crystal ball to what could happen to us. And you look at, the anemic growth that we're seeing in the country, 1.5% GDP, just a couple weeks ago, numbers coming out, the debt we're piling up. People got to start understanding we're not that far behind Spain and Portugal and Greece. We're running some of the numbers, debt ratio numbers that those countries are. And I think that's when people will figure out, okay, we've got to make some changes. So I think being truthful with people, even though there's a political downside, I think potentially in the long run has an upside.
Well, and so Social Security, what would you favor to make it solvent long term?
I think you have to favor looking at means testing, and I think you also have to look at the age requirement. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the issue of truthfulness, Governor Thompson has been taken to task by a number of groups, including Club for Growth, for his supposed support for Obamacare. Do you think Governor Thompson is telling the truth when he says, I never supported Obamacare?
I think the governor now is telling the truth that he would vote to repeal Obamacare. I think the governor is telling the truth on that.
But yes, has he ever supported it?
Has he? It's tough because you guys know that commercials are manipulated and you know, and there's different things put out. If you see the whole clip in context, which I haven't, I'm not sure. Has he supported the individual mandate? You know, it looks like it, but I don't know what the words were behind the clip. So to tell you the truth, I'm not sure.
So I look at your situation, Dan Weiss, economist.
Yep.
I look at your situation, you explain you've driven 40,000 miles this year. Every poll that's been taken in this election so far shows you in fourth place.
Well, third place until Abdi got in.
Yeah. Okay. How about if I say in last place?
Thanks, Dan.
That's not what you were going for, was it?
And had you just not moved, you would be still in the assembly, leading the assembly, and the Senate will, as you described, most likely become Republican governor. It doesn't happen a whole lot in Wisconsin that everybody's on the same page where you have the two branches of government together. Do you regret getting in this race? Was that a mistake to leave
You know what,
legislature?
people ask me that, and I don't. I don't really regret it. I felt that you know, the timing was right for me, and you know, I got into the state assembly and I ran because I thought the state was heading in the wrong direction, and you know, I got in there and thought that I'm going to stay here till I think we, you know, have made some significant changes. And what I thought, you know, I've always kind of been, you know, a fiscal hawk. That was kind of what I did, and kind of been, you know, from a fiscal standpoint. And I think we've changed the state and got it in the right direction. And I think that's the problems we face here in Wisconsin are exactly what we face on the national level. So I don't have any regrets. Do I wish that maybe some multimillionaires and stuff didn't get in the race late? Yeah. I think it could have been a much different race. And you got to remember, too, I was one of the first ones in. I think Mark announced, and then I was in, too. And then, you know, Governor Thompson was talking about it at the time, but Governor Thompson had talked about the Senate seat a few times and then didn't get in. So, you know, was it a risk to get in that early? Yeah, it was, to see what names got in there. But I still, you know, I still like our chances. I still think that there's...
How do you assess your chances?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I still think there's an undertow there, and I think there's, from just being out on the campaign trail in the last month or so, you know, I had been left for dead. There's no doubt about it, Dan. You're right. You know, when that last poll came out and had me at 6%, a lot of people left me for dead. But, you know, the same thing kind of happened to me in May when I was up at the state convention. Everybody told me, well, hey, good run, Fitz. You're going to be out on the first ballot, and you know, thanks for playing. And I said, well, we'll see. You know, I'm going to give my speech at convention, and I said, I think when people hear my story and hear why I think I should be the next United States Senator, I think it's going to resonate compared to what the other guys were. And I knew this because we were all out on the stump for a long time. We had been doing Lincoln Day dinners and speaking to different you know, groups, and I could tell the reaction I got after I would give my stump speech compared to what the other guys were getting. And, you know, went on to beat Governor Thompson and Abdi on that first ballot, went on to beat Mark, didn't gain the 60% I needed for full endorsement. But I'll tell you, I came away from that convention thinking, you know what, the same thing can happen out there if I get my message out enough. And, you know, we've really had kind of an influx in the last month here. I think due to those guys going so negative on each other, but I've raised more on my website in the last 10 days than we did in the previous 6 months, which allowed me to up my radio buy, go statewide radio, and then, you know, cut our TV ad that we have, you know, playing in Milwaukee and Green Bay. So, you know, I don't count myself out of this. I think if this poll yesterday would have showed I was, you know, on the downslide again, I would have said, yeah, I'm probably not going to win this. But, you know, to be able to double it and be at 13%, and like I said, that's a great trend line. That you know, the two top guys right now, Governor Thompson and Eric Abdi, are on the downtrend right now. Which, you know, if you've been in politics long enough, like I have, and I've run a lot of assembly campaigns. It's all about trends. It's all about momentum. And I don't feel like I'm out of this. And when you look at the fatigue that's going on, I don't know how much participation there's going to be in this election. And if there is going to be you know, a low turnout, I think it's even going to be lower outstate, where I believe, Governor Thompson and Mark Newman are probably strongest. I'm definitely strongest in the southeastern part of the state here, just because I'm better known here, and the lack of funds has not allowed me to raise my name ID much in the outer part of the state. But if there's a heavier turnout down here because of Milwaukee Talk Radio or whatever, you know what? And you can. I think Governor Walker proved against Mark Newman that you don't have to win a lot of counties to win a Republican primary. I forget what it was that Mark almost won 50 counties, but Governor Walker won the 10 that go from Green Bay down to Racine. So does it have to be a perfect storm? Absolutely, it has to be a perfect storm, but I still feel there's a shot.
So I asked other Republicans before this thing, what would you ask? What would you ask you about this race? And surprisingly, there's very little criticism. A few people were upset with your position on ethanol mandates and so forth. But the question I got more than anything else was, when does he register to lobby? The assumption is, that this is all a big ruse, an elaborate ruse for you to, eventually become a lobbyist somewhere down the road. So first of all, is that something you're planning to do if you lose? Would you do that? And then secondly, I guess it's just people having a hard time figuring out why you did make the switch to run. But to the question, is that something you would consider doing?
Well, I was going to say until you said till you lose. I said, well, you can't lobby and be a U.S. senator at the same time. But yeah, I don't know, to tell you the truth, Dan. Obviously being speaker and there's an avenue of government relations or whatever you do. But to tell you the truth, I don't know. I haven't made that decision. I don't know what I would do next. It's the question I most often get from my wife after she sees the polls.
What are you going to do after this?
Yeah. So to tell you the truth, Dan, I have no idea.
Does your
what I would do.
wife buy the trend lines?
I've been selling her hard on it, man. I've been selling her hard. So
Back to a policy question. What's your plan for cutting the federal deficit? What do you think needs to happen? And the second question is sort of related to some conventional wisdom that came out of Simpson Bowles, at least among Democrats and independents, is that you probably can't do what you need to do and give people what they say they want without eventually raising taxes.
yeah, I don't agree with that. My plan would be to go through every agency. I mean, the way we did it in the state of Wisconsin here, you have to go through everything, including the Defense Department. I think there's always waste and fraud and abuse and that you can find savings, but that's not going to get you there. I think the big thing is entitlement reform. I think that's the elephant in the room. The same way collective bargaining was, we thought unsustainable, the benefit package that federal employees had. I think that's where you see a huge amount of savings from that aspect. But it's really about growing the economy. That's how you get out of these deficits. But we did prove in Wisconsin here that if you do make if you spend less, then you have you have a chance to balance the budget. And like I said, first and foremost, let's start having the United States Senate actually have a budget that they haven't had in 3+ years. Let's put a plan in place. Even though Paul Ryan's plan takes a long time to get to a balanced budget, it is a plan. But I don't believe that you need to increase revenues in order to solve a budget deficit. I think you have to cut spending. We don't have a taxing problem in Washington. We have a spending problem. And I wouldn't support any tax increase. And the reason being is I believe that the tax increases, first and foremost, are really the wrong direction to be right now. And for President Obama just a few short months ago to extend the Bush tax cuts and say, well, we really have to because the economy is so fragile right now, to now turn on it and say, well, no, let's not extend it. Let's go after small businesses and businesses or for tax revenue, I don't think is the right thing. And when we're in this, I think a terrible recovery that could slip into another recession, a double dip recession that we're seeing. So, yeah, the problem with it is too many times, and I've seen this, and the tax increases come, and then the spending cuts that are supposed to be on the back end of Simpson Bolt, they don't come. They don't come, and you're left with the taxes. So I wouldn't support something like that.
Do you support any kind of cap on federal revenue?
I would support a cap. I would support a cap on spending, which I've said was 18% of
GDP.
GDP.
Okay.
Is there an issue where you differ significantly from the other three candidates? I'm sure
Let me
there's-
think, Dan. I don't know. Like I said, when it comes to major policy issues, I don't really see a big difference in any of us running for
So what
this
do you have to
campaign.
offer?
You know what I have to
why should
offer?
you vote for
Yeah, why should you vote for me? And that's a question I get the most. I think what I try to tell people is that it's not going to be easy to make the reforms that we have to do on the federal level. And you know what? I've just been through it. And if, especially in a Republican primary, if you're looking for a battle-tested conservative who, really had a lot of pressure on him to stay the course and do what he thought was the best, to get to us on the right track, I've done it. Governor Thompson, hasn't been in office for a while. Mark Newman hasn't. Eric Hovde's never been faced with, I think, pressure that I've seen in the past year and a half. So, that's what I tell people, that I've been through it. I'm not a very flashy guy. What you see is what you get with me, but, you're going to know what you get.
If you weren't running this, who would you support in this race?
I don't know. You know what? I think I would be.
You probably know them as well as anybody, better than us. You've been out there, you've seen them.
I do.
You've been in debates.
Yeah.
What would?
You know what? I think they all have strength. They all have their weaknesses, but I believe at this point I don't know who I would support going into it. I think I'd probably be part of that 21% that's still undecided.
You think all the campaigns are throwing their money away, going negative? And I'm talking about the presidential race and the Senate race. Presidential, they're going to spend $1 billion probably going negative. The Senate race, the ads are kind of ridiculous at this point. Is there just too much money around, and you guys are just listening to advisors and don't know what to do with it? What's going on?
No,
Or just that it works?
I think politics has shifted, and I've seen it shift, Bill, in the last probably 8 years, to where if you can define your opponent before they get out of the gate, you got a good chance of winning that election. And I'll tell you, the person who was the master at it, it was Jim Doyle. And, he got out, put early money into, he did a great job of defining who Mark Green was before Mark Green even got going. And I think that's a style of politics that you've seen nationally, and I've seen at the state level. And unfortunately, the negative politics works, and especially if you get out early and define your opponent. And I think that's what with Eric Hovde. Nobody defined him early on. So Mark Newman and Tommy Thompson had to go, whoa, wait a second. This guy's making a huge surge, $3 million of, paid advertising of positive ads with a good message, with what Eric did, can do that for you. So I think that's why you see so much early money, negative money. They're trying to define people before they get going, and that's obviously what the Obama administration is trying to do to Mitt Romney right now.
But if you had gotten, say you inherited $4 million right before this race started, wouldn't you be tempted to try to find Eric Hovde and Tommy Thompson? You've emphasized that you've run a positive campaign.
Yeah.
Part of that is by necessity, because you
Yeah.
didn't have the money to run the ads. Wouldn't you be tempted
True.
to get out there and run the negative
I
ads?
think, I always think you're going to be able to contrast yourself against somebody and their positions. But that's always probably a case by case deal, and where you are actually polling. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I knew my strategy from the get-go, just because you're right, Dan. I knew that my funds were going to be limited, and that I probably was going to have to stay out of the fray to do it. So, I mean, is that a calculated decision by me? Absolutely. So,
It's the fine gold plan.
yeah, exactly. And that's what people bring up to me all the time. Yeah, which probably would have worked out even better if Eric Hovde didn't get in and make it a four-way. The three-way race tends to play better with the fine gold. But I still think you could see the same thing happen. There's no doubt about it that there seems to be that animosity towards the negative campaign. I was at an event in Green Bay last night, and the people, the biggest applause I got wasn't on any policy thing. It was that I'm going to stay positive in this campaign and not go negative.
But did we talk about fundraising, and this was part of your strategy, and I've looked at the figures just even today, and you talked about a surge, but you really haven't generated any dollars to speak of in the last few weeks. I mean, did you just flat out give up on trying to give to raise money? I mean, I guess one of the digs has been that you haven't worked hard enough in this campaign, and you haven't worked hard enough at raising money as well. And so I'm just kind of get a sense as to really what your commitment is.
No, it's you know what? It's difficult. Early on, I had some success raising some money, but knew it was going to be difficult. And you know, if you look at the timeline of when then Thompson got into the campaign, it became more difficult then. If you look, you know, where we were heading, you know, this is also a different aspect for me that I've never faced in an election, where these polls come out of nowhere and really define what the race looks like, whether it, you know, you believe the polls or not. And a lot of these polls I've seen, whether it's, you know, Marquette or PPP or the Quinnipiac, I think a lot of them are flawed. Mm-hmm. I think they're very flawed. But guess what? When they get printed in the paper or they get recorded, you know, reported on the news, people take them for gospel.
And that
it terribly affects fundraising. You know, it takes you a long time to start building momentum to getting people to believe. You know, people are going to support you with their dollars if they can believe you can win.
Well, are
and
you
as soon as
trying
you
to
can.
raise money?
Yeah, no, I've made phone calls. I've talked to people. Yeah, you know, obviously we've done that. We've done a lot through email. I've done a lot of letters. You know, campaign letters. Trying to raise money. It's just been flat tough, and a lot's got to do with the recall, and a lot's got to do with the names that are in this race that really have kind of you know, tied up the money. And I'm not going to apologize for that, but you know, that's really the reality of it, is that, you know, it's not for a lack of trying, that we just haven't been able to get the resources.
Well, there's another name in this race, Tammy Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the recent polling, she's actually doing pretty well against all the Republican candidates. What do you think whoever the nominee is for the Republican Party needs to do in order to win that race against what will be, I think, a tougher opponent than maybe you might have imagined?
No, I think Representative Baldwin will be a tough opponent. She will be well funded, as we well know. She is a very likable lady and is a good campaigner. So I don't think. I think it'll be a very tough race, and in the state of Wisconsin, we know that U.S. Senate races and in a presidential year, you know, this is a state that you're obviously going to run very close elections in. But you know, I think Representative Baldwin has had the luxury of not being defined yet. I don't think a lot of people around the state know her. I think she's had, you know, it's always nicer when you don't have a primary. And she's been out there running statewide, you know, very positive ads and very soft selling ads. But I think when people find out that Tammy Baldwin has represented a district that is very, very progressive, and you know, when you look at her voting record, it is a very progressive. I mean, there's a reason why she was voted one of the most liberal members of Congress. I'm not faulting her for that, because her district probably demands that from her, that congressional district and where she's from, Madison. But I think in a statewide race, once you start defining those votes, and you know, and I also think, you know, the timing, political timing, and the way things work out. You know, will she be the right candidate at this right time, where I think jobs and the economy and taxes and debt are really going to be the fundamental questions in this election. And you know, when people are struggling out there, are you going to vote for somebody who's, you know, kind of been part of the, you know, part of the status quo in Washington for a while, and has a track record of raising taxes and voting for spending increases? I just don't think that's the right message for this time. I think people will, you know, go with somebody that they think is probably more going to be more conducive to growing businesses in this country, and I think once she is better defined, I think whoever the Republican nominee will be just fine against her.
I'm interested, if you were to become a senator, there's all different types of senators, the backroom dealers, the lone wolves, the guys who, you know, get caught trying to run to the cameras, you can't get between them and the camera. What kind of senator would you be?
Yeah, you know what? I think I'd be a senator the same way I've been in the legislature. I think I've always been a guy who, you know, I kind of came out of nowhere and shot up the leadership ladder, but that's because I think the type of guy I am. I'm a normal guy. I'm an average guy, and I think that I've always had success in being able to get my point across and build consensus. I think that's what you need to be, whether it's in your caucus, whether it's across the aisle. And I'm not going to be a guy who. I often tell the story that my first session in the legislature, I sat in the corner with 5 different guys, and they called us the guys in the corner, and we were kind of a thorn in the side of leadership at the time. Yeah, we're very creative, the guys in the corner. Yeah. So I voted against the very first budget that we were in. It was a split legislature at the time, but and. Basically, one of my friends who was in the legislature at the time, who became a good friend, said, "Hey, there's a lot of talk. If you're going to sit back in that corner and just be a guy who votes no all the time and stays in your conservative district, you're not. I can tell you're not going to get a lot of input in how policy and how things are done." And at that point, I said to myself, you know what? If you want to get things done or move a caucus in a certain direction or what you believe you're principled on, you're going to have to run for leadership someday. And that's when I decided that I was going to have to do that, to what I thought is lead people in a direction of, conservative principles, what I thought was important of less government, less spending, less taxation. I thought there was too much of it. So, that's the kind of guy I'll be. I'll tell you, the first year, I didn't say anything either. I didn't open my mouth. I listened. I learned. As you guys know, I'm not a guy who goes out on the mic and speaks on every issue and every amendment. I pick my spots. I think I talk when I think it's needed, and that's kind of if you talk to my mother, the Fighting Fitzgerald brothers, I'm definitely the more laid back one.
What did Mom like best?
She likes me best. Yeah, no doubt about it. She likes me best. So,
Can you
yeah.
talk about foreign policy for a second?
Sure.
Are we doing the right things in Syria? Do we need to do more in Europe?
Syria, I think Assad is definitely somebody who, I know President Obama has said now we are working behind the scenes, and I agree that, you can't let somebody just slaughter their own people like we've seen in Syria. When it comes to the Middle East and that whole region, then the thing I worry about the most is if you do replace that, like we saw in Egypt with Mubarak, I mean, who is going to come in their place? And that's what I most worry about, of who's going to take over, when it comes to the Middle East.
But
So-
do we need to be more active in Syria if we can't let come?
I think we have to. I don't think we should do troops on the ground. I think we can provide intelligence and do what something from behind. I think is the way to approach that right now. So I would agree with that. Yeah, it's a difficult region. I also believe that when you see what's going on with Iran and Ahmadinejad and that regime. I'm 100% behind backing the Israelis and Israel, who've been an ally of ours, and I think we should stop at no cost to prevent them, from gaining nuclear capabilities.
Speaking of troops and defense,
Yeah.
you said you would be in favor of cutting defense. How much?
I don't think I'd say cutting defense. I said I would look at the Defense Department, see if there's any waste or whatever is in there. I don't mean by cutting troops. I think that's the wrong thing to do right now,
What would
is
you
cutting the troop size. I would look at whatever dig into their budget and see what if you thought there were, duplication or whatever you could look at. But I think our military, I think America, we have always achieved our peace through strength. And I think our defense program has to have that strength in order to be the peacekeeper that we have been. And, I think we should stick with our naval superiority that we have. We make the battleships right up there in Manitowoc. I think that, we should definitely still remain our strength. I think if you deplete the troops too far or cut the troops back, it takes too long to get those troops back built up to the level that I think provides security. I think when it comes to defense, the number one thing is protecting the people of the United States of America. I've always felt that way, and I think sometimes people take for granted, that we have not had an attack since September 11, 2001 on American soil, and I think that still should be a top priority, and I think you need a strong defense for that.
So what's your opinion of Bernanke and the Fed's monetary policy, especially the possibility of a third round of quantitative easing?
Yeah, I think it's the wrong direction, and I think that there should be an audit done on the Fed, is what I believe. Is that my phone? Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Good ringtone.
If it's a donor, you can take the
It's
call.
Tommy Thompson.
It's not Scott Walker.
No, it was not the governor. I wish it was.
Still not endorsing.
He'll probably just text me that. So, the quantitative easing I think is part of the problem right now, and what we see is
How so?
Well, you can't keep printing money. That's the real problem we see here, and when we look at the debt that we have and the foreign debt that we have, there's going to be a time where China's going to say, you know what, we don't want to hold as much of your debt anymore. My previous foray before politics was, I was down in Chicago and traded at the Mercantile Exchange, and so I know markets, traded Eurodollars, traded S&P 500s. If they take and flood that bond market, and what it would do to interest rates over in this country would be just horrendous of where we're heading financially. So, I don't think it's the right direction. I think you can't just keep printing money. I think if we don't tackle the debt and restore, some of the confidence in the market, I think that's the real problem. And, when you look at the markets, I mean, that's kind of what you look at. At the first Friday of every month, the big numbers used to come out when I was trading, screaming and yelling in the pit every day. It gave me a good foray right into politics. You look at unemployment number would come out, non-farm payroll, big number we always trade, consumer confidence. I don't think there's any consumer confidence out there right now, and I think it's really struggling in our economy. So I think we have to tackle the debt to build that confidence, and I think you would see a lot more businesses that have that anxiety and uncertainty out there right now until they see that we're either increasing our bond rating or seeing that the federal government is doing better from that standpoint of a balance sheet. I don't know if a lot of people are going to be out there trying to expand their business or locate here.
So you mentioned you would audit the Fed. What do you mean by that, and why would you audit the Fed?
I think you do an audit of it because I'm not sure right now, what the Fed is really trying to accomplish, and I think that's the crux of the matter of, we've got interest rates that are so low right now, and QE3, which, let's face it, the only reason why the dollar is doing halfway decent is because the euro is in worse shape. So, so I think you'd have to, audit it and take a look and see what they're up to.
Is there some risk to the Fed's independence, though, if Congress is insisting on an audit?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there some risk to the Fed's independence?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know if there's any risk to that.
Anything else?
I had one quick short
Yeah,
one. Lee was right that you haven't raised much money, but some of the money you raised early on was from beer distributors and beer interests. Was that a thank you for the beer bill that went through the last session? I don't remember the details. I remember the microbreweries were very upset about the bill.
No, it was not. I've a lot of people don't know this, but one of my first jobs out of college was working for a distributor, a beer distributor, Wisconsin Wet Goods in Watertown, Wisconsin, and I sold Miller products. So I've had a good relationship with the beer distributors for a number of years, and yeah.
All right. Well, Jeff Fitzgerald, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.